Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Laura Thomas. I am a solutions coordinator for the Center for Professional and Executive Development, and I'm so excited to have you with us today, and you get to hear from Ann Martel. And so before I introduce Ann, I'd like to share a few words about the Wisconsin School of Business, the Center for Professional and Executive Development. Just so you know, CPED offers programs and certificates that will give you that modern, relevant skills needed to advance your skills and your career. All of our programs offer interactive learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. And so CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. So on this page, you'll see for more information, please visit our website at uwcped.org. Now, if you have any questions you'd like to ask during today's webinar, you can submit those questions either using the chat or the QA buttons that are at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen. And we'll pose those questions that are submitted during the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I also want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available within the next few days for you. And so now I just have the honor to turn this over to Ann Martel. And just to give you a little bit of background on Ann, Ann is a highly regarded business leader with a passion for developing business acumen and leadership skills through high energy presentations and classes. Now, her clients such as Abbott, Newsmart, and Honeywell all have praised Ann for her business knowledge, her strategic approach, and her real world insights. Now, Ann's experience as a dynamic executive has been more than 20 years in the Fortune 500 companies. And she's been providing her visionary, strategic, and analytical skills, her ability to flawlessly juggle multiple priorities, looming deadlines, and large-scale projects. So now, thank you for being with us, Ann, and we're excited to hear about the webinar today. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much, Laura. Man, when somebody reads your biography, I think I often have that imposter syndrome where I'm thinking, who is that? that can't be me. But welcome, everybody. As Laura graciously introduced me, I'm Ann Martel. I have been affiliated with the Center for Professional and Executive Development for over 10 years. But my formal training, like if you asked my 93-year-old mom, she'd say, well, she used to be an accountant. And that is how I started my career. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison many years ago, did the traditional accountant career path, director of accounting, chief financial officer, big companies, small companies, for-profits, nonprofits. But my true passion is facilitating and helping people become better leaders, understanding business acumen and financial literacy to achieve greater success, not just for you personally, but for your entire organization. So my role at CPED is I deliver 3 different programs that are open enrollment programs. Finance and accounting for non-financial professionals obviously is an important one because it's looking at not making junior accountants out of anybody, but to truly understand the language of business. But the other sessions that I lead at CPED include transitions to executive management and business acumen and strategy. These sessions really focus on how do you address strategy in your organization? What is strategy? Why is it so important? And then from the financial perspective, how do you measure the success of your strategy? So when you think about the term strategy, the definition, the Webster definition or the dictionary definition, a plan of action or policy designated to achieve a major or overall aim. But in reality, strategy The history of it is rooted deeply in military. Military strategies have been around for ages. We're going to take this hill, or we're going to do this flank, or this is the strategy we're going to take to win a war or a military offensive. It wasn't until in the 50s and 60s that businesses really started to address the whole issue of strategy. And it's really easy in any organization to kind of confuse the whole concept of strategy. We have been so focused on operational effectiveness, and that kind of clouds the whole discussion of strategy. What I mean by that is we're always on this never ending quest. We need to reduce costs. We need to improve quality. We need to improve productivity. Whatever the current buzzword is in any organization, that spawns all these management techniques and initiatives that we're going to do, but it's not really strategy. Strategy is about getting your organization on the path to sustainable success. And the most common way of measuring that from a financial perspective is sustainable profitability or sustainable growth. So we'll hear a lot of terms when you're talking about strategy. You might hear strategic tactics or objectives or the mission of the organization, strategy itself, vision, goals, strategic initiatives. And all of those terms can be used when you're defining strategy. But keep in mind, a strategy or a strategic business goal or a strategic initiative or objective, it's a very high level type of a, a of a term. It's a high level concept. And it's really taking that mission or that vision of your organization and kind of getting it down to where are we going to go and how are we going to get there. Let me give you an example. Strategy. Let's say we're all located in somewhere, Madison, Wisconsin. We're sitting at the Fluno Center and we're in Madison, Wisconsin. And we want to go to Chicago. So our strategy, where do we want to go? We want to go to Chicago. How we get there is more our operational techniques and our operational initiatives. Maybe even if you're talking in the finance terms, that's how we're going to do our operational plan or our operational budget. But the strategy is that guiding force of where are we going to go. And in the most basic terms, strategy is how we win. How do we win? Okay. Well, that kind of, you might almost think of the race. How are we going to win this race? A company can only outperform their rivals or their competitors if they can establish some sort of difference that can be replicated, that it can be rejuvenated, that it can be preserved. You don't want to just do a one and done. You don't want to say, hey, I've got the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you don't keep updating or rejuvenating your strategy. You might have short-term competitive advantage, but a good strategy, a successful strategy is how are we going to win for the long term? And it usually comes from two sources. We're either going to deliver great value, we're going to be able to differentiate ourselves from our competitors. So you think about Ferrari. Why would somebody buy a Ferrari? It could be for name, it could be for status, it could be for performance, but you're going to pay a lot of money for a Ferrari. So that's Ferrari differentiating themselves from other car manufacturers based on different factors that their customers want. And those customers are willing to pay a higher price for that. Now, the other way of developing a competitive advantage and winning the race is through cost, cost management or low cost, not low price, low cost. When you think about Walmart as a retailer, Walmart has spent billions of dollars to really be able, through their vendor relationships, through their inventory management, through their technology infrastructure, they have spent billions of dollars to maintain a very low cost environment. Walmart isn't always the lowest price, but if they can maintain that advantage as a low cost leader, their success comes from more profitability for each unit that they sell. So, how do you win? It's usually from one of two different ways. I'm going to be differentiating myself and able to charge a higher price for that, or I'm going to be the low cost leader, and that way I can maintain greater profitability. So that's the basics of strategy. Now, the process of strategy, when you're going through and you're in a retail organization and you're thinking about what's our strategy, where do we want to go? That's usually how we start. Many companies, many organizations, many individuals start the strategic process. Where do we want to go? We want to meet our competitors head on. Well, maybe that's not the best approach. Maybe the process should start with, where are we right now? Where are we right now? And this is the part of the strategic planning process that often gets overlooked. And it's a really important step because it really doesn't matter how you got to where you are right now, but you got to have an honest appraisal of where are you right now? Where are you? And where are you in position or relevance to your competitors and to the environment? The retail industry has been tipped on its head over the last 20 or so years. So having that honest appraisal, know where your starting point is, then makes it easier when you start deciding, well, where do we want to be? How do we want to compete? What's going to be our competitive advantage? Are we going to compete in a very niche type of a market, or are we going to go really broad? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to sustain that for the long term? And once you have those two bookends, where are we right now and where do we want to go? Then you fill in that third step of, how do we get there? What are the specific initiatives and tactics that we're going to implement to give us the best chance of achieving that strategy that we're moving towards? So where are we now? Where do we want to be? And then how do we get there? We're doers, us as leaders, we want to go right to how are we going to get there? What's our tactic going to be? We're going to set these operational goals. We're going to, as I started out the session, we're going to reduce costs or we're going to improve productivity. Those aren't strategies. Those are our initiatives or tactics. So it's important to have that bigger picture of where you want to go. Now, I mentioned your world, the retail environment. It has really been a roller coaster ride in the retail environment. Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos had this vision, and Amazon came out of his vision of he wanted to do something online, and he didn't want to get to the end of his career and have regrets. So way back in 1994, Bezos started this idea of an online store. And he kind of looked at 20 different products that he thought he could sell in this online store. And he settled on books. So starting in July of 1995, Amazon was born and started out just being a bookseller. 1995. That's only 30 years ago. And that bookseller eventually expanded into CDs, movies, and finally to what we know Amazon as today. For example, They made their first profit, their first penny of profit in the fourth quarter of 2001. So from 1995 all the way through 2001, they never made a penny of profit. They had some good investors keeping the cash flowing into the organization, but they hadn't figured out truly how to monetize that competitive advantage or build that competitive advantage strategy that we just think of when we think of Amazon today. In 2011, so 10 years after they finally turned their first profit, they had 30,000 full-time employees. By 2016, just 5 years later, they were at over 180,000 full-time employees. By 2017, just a year later, they had over 566,000 full-time employees across the globe. Incredible growth. Incredible growth just 8 years ago. They, in 2018, so shortly after the huge increase, in 2018, Amazon had about 5.5% share of all total revenue spend, total retail revenue, excluding restaurants and cars. But they had 5% of the retail revenue stream, but they had over 43% of online sales. At the end of 2024, kind of dipped a little bit in overall online sales. They're down to a measly 38%, but that is more because the pie got a little bit bigger. More of you guys, other retailers, really got into the online space that Amazon was dominating back in 2018. Amazon themselves have grown to almost 8% of total retail revenue. So one of the trends that we'll explore a little bit later in our session is the bigs tend to keep getting bigger. The Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, that trend is continuing. That the bigger retailers are really eating up a little bit more of the share of retail spend. So an incredible, crazy roller coaster ride. So how do you compete with that? It's a different set of rules. Flexibility, your ability to respond, is critical. Competitive market changes. It used to be, I outsource, or you do positioning, or you'd look for efficiencies. That was once the heart of strategy. It's just not going to cut it anymore. You have to be able to respond to the data as quickly as you can and pivot as needed. The ambiguity doesn't lie in, hey, we don't have enough data to know what's going on in our markets. It's more the deluge of data. There's so much data out there. So how do you pick and choose and set your strategy to respond to these changes? One framework when you're looking at strategy is called VUCA. And VUCA, it has really come into the forefront of strategy and strategy initiatives over the last couple of years because this whole pace of change has started to be so incredibly rapid. So VUCA it's just an acronym. It means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Addressing those issues within your industry. So whether it's a retail industry, the healthcare industry, the insurance industry, the banking industry, the automobile industry, how do you deal with a VUCA environment? Let's explore each of the concepts of VUCA a little bit more and start thinking about, what does this mean in my industry, in my retail space? How does my organization keep up with these components of a VUCA environment? So V, volatility, things that are changing rapidly. For retailers, obviously your markets have changed incredibly. And you've gone, bricks and mortar to online to digital, social media, all the technology, including AI, has really had an impact in the retail market. So volatility, the changes, things that are changing very rapidly with regards to markets and technology. Volatility can also be driven by geopolitical events, what's going on in the world. One of the biggest changes in the retail environment with online shopping is, if I wanted to start a small retail store, it used to be bricks and mortar. I'd go and maybe rent a store and sell some stuff out of my store within my own geographical area. And then as I grew, maybe I grew to the state of Wisconsin, or maybe I grew to the upper Midwest, or maybe I finally grew to the entire US and then to the Americas. Now, with the digital environment, online selling, utilizing the Etsy's and the Amazons of the world have really changed your model of business so that geopolitical events are going to play a much bigger role in your strategy and execution. The economy, both here and throughout the world. Are we in a recession? Is there inflation? We've been dealing with inflation over the last several years. Costs going up, prices going up, people's disposable incomes shrinking, and assessing the impact of that on your environment and being able to pivot your strategy to address that trend. One of the trends we'll touch on at the end of the session today is this trend towards value. People are, in the restaurant environment, in the restaurant industry, are moving away from some of the higher end restaurants and spending more of their disposable income at value friendly types of retail locations. So that impact on your strategy and your environment. The U, uncertainty. What's coming from a regulatory perspective? We're in the United States, we're in the era of a change in the political power. um, Regardless of how you feel about it or where you're at in that, it still is a change. And the regulations that go along with it and the compliance to those regulations. If you're in a retail environment where you're selling something that um, has a little more scrutiny, a little more regulation, you're a drugstore as opposed to my little shop here in Mayville, Wisconsin, where I go and buy some decorative items. It's going to be a totally different animal. Being able to harness the cost of that compliance. Uncertainty of what's going on in the competitive scene. Who's going to enter your market space? Not just who's competing with you now, but where might future competitors come from for your retail, your share of the pie. The huge thing that impacts you is the uncertainty for the changing customer tastes and needs. One of the trends in retail is there's a greater demand from customers wanting to know how your product is sourced. Is it sourced organically or is it sourced ethically? That can impact the demand for your product. The pandemic, obviously, that threw everything into hyperspeed of needing to do some changes. Retail environment, huge impact. If your store was closed, how do you still get to the marketplace? If you're a retail establishment, do you do curbside pickup? Do you do delivery? Do you partner with DoorDash or Uber to get your products out to people who may not want to come to your store? If you're a restaurant environment, do you have pickup capabilities to pick up to go food? So that pandemic really sped up that uncertainty, and it came from a very disruptive event, obviously. The C of VUCA is complexity, the complexity of now having global markets instead of very local markets, the continued supply chain challenges for those of you in the retail that are in a retail environment where you're maybe reliant on products from China. What's going to be the challenge of tariffs if and when they come, or if you're securing materials or ingredients from Canada or Mexico, what might be the impacts of tariffs? Um, Mitigating risks, maybe product liability, things like that. Cross-cultural communication. Will your products and your industry um, being careful and being aware of your products might sell in one geographic location and perhaps not be as popular in another. And how can you address that through communication? And then finally, ambiguity. The A of VUCA is there's when you're thinking about strategic decision making, new products, new markets, you don't always get clear information on where you want to go. Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? The data might be ambiguous. You might be, hey, this is a great market to get into versus, nope, this isn't a really great market to get into. How do you find and feather out where you want to go? Mergers and acquisitions, that can really throw a monkey wrench into any organization. If you're perking along, and you're in an environment and your retail outlet is maybe small to mid-size, are you going to get gobbled up by a big fish? One of the things that Amazon has done is their growth has been a lot through acquisition. I mean, obviously they've grown through demand, but and grown organically, but they've also grown through mergers and acquisitions, acquired Whole Foods, one example of that. But they've done a lot of smaller acquisitions along the way. Ambiguity if in dealing with ethics and ethical sourcing, and then also the validity of data and AI. How are you going to incorporate AI into your strategy, into your day-to-day effectiveness? Those are all things that can be very ambiguous for you as you're trying to establish your strategy. So a tip, in a VUCA environment, to do well in this VUCA world, one of the things you can do as a leader is encourage this mindset with your team, within your circle of influence, within your organization, of learning and working together all the time. Kind of seems, pretty straightforward, but being able to pivot, being able to be agile, and be able to respond efficiently to this changing VUCA environment requires that learning and working together even more than ever. So as we think about business acumen and business strategy, business acumen, this is an excerpt from a Harvard Business article called Level Up Your Leaders. And it's a really interesting article because it marries the concept of what's business acumen. Business acumen often is thought of as only financial acumen, and that's not the case. So this article explores the differences of strategy, markets, and financial acumen. So it looks at that as three legs of a stool of business acumen. Business acumen is the stool, but there's three legs that support your understanding of business acumen: the strategy of your organization, the market analysis for your organization, and the financial performance of your organization. And one of the statistics that is noted in this article is businesses are struggling to keep up with all the rapid pace of digital transformations. So 57% of global leaders report that their businesses are struggling. They can't meet the pace of the technological change. Just really hard to keep up with. Other organizations, statistics shows here that they're trying to embrace a flatter organizational structure or hierarchy. You look at an org chart, and if you've got all these levels of management before you get to the frontline worker, you may not be able to respond as efficiently and quickly and pivot as you need to because you have too many layers of bureaucracy. So the ratio of leaders to employees at fast-paced organizations is it has much fewer management layers than a traditional, like you think about maybe an insurance company, the old-fashioned insurance company or banking, where you've got a president, and then you got a senior vice president, and then you got an associate vice president, and then you have a senior director, and then a director, and then a senior manager, and then a manager, and then a supervisor, and then you finally get down to the people doing the work. And those complex organizational structures can really slow down the ability to respond quickly to a VUCA environment. And your customers, they have more options than ever before. I love the statistics for a retail establishment. 353 million, the number of items that Amazon algorithms will sift through to curate your product options for a site visitor. So just some interesting areas here. And the goal is to future proof your organization, to get ready for new cultures that are emerging and being able to respond to that VUCA business environment. Obviously, the pandemic fast tracked this for many industries, including the retail industry. But understanding that it is more than just financial statements. Strategy and business acumen is more than that. Now, as we think about strategy and we start thinking about not just strategy from a macro level, but strategy within the retail industry, the focus on strategy, again, from this Harvard article, Leveling Up Your Leaders, I like this quote. There are 10 ways to do something. 8 are fine. What option makes us different? What decision delivers more value for the company and our customers? That's how you get on the road to a successful strategy. And strategy is critical at every level of leadership. Too often we think strategy, it lives in the C-suite, the chief financial officer, the chief executive officer, the chief information officer. That's the only place, that's the only level that really is concerned with strategy. But in reality, strategy is important at all levels of the organization, not just the C-suite or the director level, the manager, frontline manager level, the individual contributor level. So here's some examples of some questions for different levels within an organization as you're working through and engaging people at all levels into this whole strategic process. Here's some questions as a leader you might want to raise at your company, or depending on where you're at in your career plan. These are things that maybe you want to be able to answer at the level that you're at. So for an individual contributor, if that's the level that you're at, you should be asking, what's my organization's business strategy? Just get a feel for what is it? Are we the Ferrari or are we the Walmart? And how do I contribute to that? My function, my level, how do I contribute to the organization's strategy? For a manager, frontline leader, whatever the term is in your environment, maybe a store manager, maybe a district manager, etc. Given my organization's business strategy, how can I get my team to contribute even better to executing the strategy? If you're more at the higher level, maybe you're a regional manager, regional director, or you're at corporate and you're a leader there, how should our strategy inform my decisions, prioritize the initiatives, and help me allocate resources that will help achieve our strategy? So strategy is important at all levels of an organization. All right, here comes a quote. Sam Walton at Walmart. The key to success is to get out into the store and listen to what the associates have to say. It's terribly important for everyone to get involved. Our best ideas come from our clerks and our stock personnel. I'll change up Sam's lingo to make it more 2025. But it is true. When you're establishing where do we want to go, and remember the process is where are we now, where do we want to go, and how are we going to get there? Being able to get insight from all levels of an organization gets that buy-in and really communicates the engagement that everybody is important and plays a role in the strategic process. And Mr. Bezos, 3 most important things in retail: location, location, location. Three most important things for Amazon or for their consumer business is technology, technology, technology. I think as a retailer right now, you kind of have to have a mix of both. If you've got bricks and mortar, retail, location, 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 still extremely important, but you can't forget about technology, technology, technology. So what does this all mean in a retail environment? Um, from a strategic perspective, as you're operating in a retail environment, being able to really embrace the hybrid shopping environment, the hybrid shopping experience, the phygital, a good blend between physical and digital. I remember reading case studies, probably just within the last 5 years, of how some of the bigger box stores, the Walmarts, the Targets of the world, really were struggling with this whole hybrid shopping experience, getting into the phase of we still got bricks and mortar. How do we get our digital game up to speed? We're probably not going to be Amazon, but how can we at least play in that field? And I think that's true at any level in the retail industry. You don't have to be Target or Walmart. As I stated before, live in a real small rural community in Wisconsin, Mayville. Got 5,000 people in Mayville. One of my favorite retailers in Mayville, bricks and mortar store on Main Street, sells great retail, great decorative stuff, really cool stuff, but they also have to have a digital presence. It's just part of it, providing that seamless delivery. If I can't get to the store, I want to be able to go and order online. If I'm pressed for time, I want to order online and be able to pick it up, run in, pick it up, and get out or get it delivered. So that seamless delivery is important. I was thrilled when I was doing my Christmas shopping this year, and I'm in the Target in Fond du Lac, and I was wanting to buy my husband um, a home monitoring system. So external cameras, Ring doorbell, internal cameras. And I got the internal camera and the Ring doorbell, but I couldn't get the external cameras that I wanted. So I'm on my little Target Circle app, and they had it at the Menominee Falls store location. And I'm thinking, I don't really want to drive to Menominee Falls from Fond du Lac. I guess I could do it. The weather was kind of iffy. And they had this new option. Somebody will deliver it to you today. Oh, cool. So I click on that, and by 5 o'clock that night, somebody dropped those cameras off at my location. So seamless delivery. How do you embrace that in a retail environment? The social media impact has has really had um, implications for retailers. Word of mouth. Word of mouth about your products, word of mouth of your customer service, word of mouth about your delivery. Do you offer seamless delivery? Word of mouth of if something goes wrong, you got to have a return. How well do you handle that? So, social media impact is another guiding force in setting retail strategy. Value oriented customer behavior. Blah, blah, blah. That's kind of some buzzwords, isn't it? Customer comes first. Understand who the customer is and what they want, with the understanding that that may change tomorrow. I was working with the International Dairy Bakery and I can't, I'm having a brain freeze. But they were talking about all the changing within the grocery area, all the changing um, wants and needs of the customer. Whether it's I want more organic options, I want more gluten-free options, I want more um, to-go options, things that I can go that I can take them home and have my dinner ready to go and not have to make anything. So understanding what your customers need and want and trying to stay one step ahead of that. Our mall's making a comeback. There are some early trends and some early data that is showing that the malls are actually making a comeback, that people are wanting to go back and have somewhat of that mall experience. Now, they still want to have the digital experience. It doesn't mean Amazon's going away, but how can you harness that that return perhaps to bricks and mortar. What's going to be the role of AI in retail? I don't have the answer to that, but it is a question that you're going to want to address, a trend, not a trend, but a reality of how can you use artificial intelligence, not just within the strategic, what's a good strategy for this type of a retail environment, but to garner information about your competitors, to get consumer dynamic information, um, all these different things. There's a plethora of ways that AI can be incorporated into your organization. And the dominance of the large retailers. The big big stores have a tendency to be taking up more of that market share, and how do you address that? So what does a successful strategy look like for a retailer? What do you need to do? Discipline and focus on your core business. Where do you really excel? Where are we right now? That's your jumping off point for establishing your strategy of where you want to go. It's also your foundation for how do I differ from my competitors. Aim for customer loyalty versus customer satisfaction. How can you better serve your, I don't know why I said patients. I must have been thinking about healthcare. How can we better serve our customers when and where they want to be served? I have a bad slide here. Sorry about that. How do you align and engage across the organization? What success? Using your data, being able to pivot, and how do you engage your employees in achieving your strategy? So successful strategy doesn't create silos. It ensures everyone is pulling in the same direction. So the retail mix, some of the things that will impact where do you want to go? What's your strategy going to be? Your pricing model. What's going to be your markdowns? How are you going to set your prices? How do you maintain your margins? One of the ways that you differentiate yourself in strategy is through maybe low cost. Well, how does that impact your margins? The difference between what you're priced at and what your cost is. You want to think about promotion. What's going to be your strategy with regards to promotion? Or we want to be here. How do we employ promotional techniques that are going to get us to where we want to be? Whether it's public relations, social media, advertising. Strategy about place. Where are we going to operate? Bricks and mortar, digital, operating hours, space. Products. What are we going to offer? Are we going to offer additional services? What are we going to do? What type of an assortment? What's our product portfolio going to look like? And if we need to develop new products, how are we going to do that? And how can we do that efficiently and get those products to market very, very quickly? Presentation, how are you going to merchandise your product? How are you going to present? If you're in a bricks and mortar perspective, how is your staff going to be presented? Whether it's they're going to wear uniforms of some sort or not. Maybe how are you going to develop and deliver your product? And then obviously your personnel. How does your personnel all fit into this whole aspect of setting strategy with the consumer or the customer in the middle? Retail is different than other industries. Retail is different from banking. Retail is different from Ford Motor Company. Retail is different from Microsoft. It's very, very hyper customer focused, more than any other industry that's out there. You have multiple sales channels, face-to-face, digital, etc. Distribution, distributors, directly, business to business. Inventory and supply chain management are critical. Inventory management, if you've got stuff sitting on your shelves for a long period of time, that's eating up your cash. It's costing you money to store it, to protect it, maybe even pay taxes on it if you live in an environment where you have personal property taxes. Management of your inventory is critical on that aspect, but you also don't want to get to the point where you have stockouts, where you can't satisfy your customer needs. Your pricing strategies have to be dynamic. I was working with a retailer They sell sports equipment, mainly soccer and baseball equipment. And most of their product comes from China. And so as the prices were rising during the really rapid inflationary period that we went through, their prices are rising and or their costs are rising, sorry, their costs are rising, but they hadn't updated their price listing in over a year. And I said, you gotta address your prices. And it was just because somebody just didn't have a chance to get to it. No, pricing strategies must be dynamic and you need to address it with the eye to the competition. I get it. You can't just raise your prices willy-nilly, but there might be room to raise your price to accommodate those increasing costs. Brands and marketing, key drivers for a retail environment. Keeping ahead of seasonality and trends is an important aspect that really drives the retail industry, where seasonality and trends for Microsoft, you don't sell more at Christmas time for Microsoft. So that's something that's unique to your industry. So bearing that in mind as you set a strategy is going to be important. And obviously the experience and the engagement of the customer is going to be critical. Some trends. These are just some things that have been in the news lately and kind of goes back to a couple slides ago about, are the malls making a comeback and the big are getting bigger. There was an article in the Associated Press called Value Seekers Drove 2024 Retail Trends and Dead Ends. Value is vogue. The whole concept of whether you're going out to eat and you want to get a more price conscious objective versus I'm shopping at Target and I'm going to use or buy their house brand instead of a name brand. Value is in vogue. And I think this is going to be in place as long as people feel that their disposable income has been impacted. They don't have as much to spend on some of these more discretionary items. Value is going to be in vogue. Total Retail organization, a total retail blog, they had an article on how malls are making a comeback. And it talked about the yearning for malls, that how, in our day and age, the malls used to be the social area. Kids would go there to hang out. And I remember when my kids were young, I used to give my daughter would have a birthday party, and I just take these 5 to 8 girls to the mall, and I give them each $20, let them loose in Claire's. Okay, buy whatever you want, and then that was my idea of a birthday party. But those memories of malls might be driving a comeback for the mall environment. There was a Wall Street Journal article that talked about big retail is getting bigger and smaller players are struggling. The aspect of the Walmarts of the world, the Amazons of the world, the big box stores getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The Home Depot's kind of acing out the aces in your local community. And then finally, that importance of AI, tech, and social media. Forbes had an article called The Future of Retail, that if that's something that you want to take a peek at, I would recommend that you take a look at that Forbes article. Really good insights into the role that artificial intelligence, technology, and social media has on the retail industry and how that can impact your strategy. All right. Couple quotes to finish up my content, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. Sam Walton again, there's only one boss, the customer. I agree. He can fire everybody in the company, from the chairman on down, simply by spending his money somewhere else. Voting with your feet. And lastly, Steve Jobs, my favorite quote about strategy: deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. If your strategy is not to be this big behemoth retailer, there are things that you're going to decide not to do. If you try to be everything to everyone, you will fail. So I love when Jobs talked about deciding what we're not going to do is just as important as deciding what we are going to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. Laura, why don't you wrap us up?
Thank you so much, Anne. That was fantastic. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Before we get to the Q&A, we'll have a few minutes for that. I just wanted to let you know that CPED is ready to help you, your teams, your organization to really continue to evaluate and further develop your own business strategies. And I actually would love to set up some time to talk to you about our consulting, our coaching, our customized professional development program, our open enrollment programs. All of these can be tailored to your strategy. And so, as you can see, my email is on this slide. And I really look forward to further exploring any of these opportunities with you and your organization. So thank you so much for joining. But we do have some Q&A that I'd like to kind of go through with you. And if you have a few minutes here till
I
1 o'clock,
certainly do.
great. We've got a few
Absolutely.
more minutes. So first question that we have, which is great, is which part of strategy process itself is the most important?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love to say that they're all really important. The one that gets skipped the most is where are we now? Because or it's not it's skipped the most because we always want to keep moving ahead and moving forward. So that one is probably um it's important because if you don't do that step, you don't know where you need to get to. So you can set this great strategy, but if you don't really know where you're starting from, it makes it very difficult for the how are we going to get there step. And the other aspect that makes it difficult is too often that where are we right now is done. Um, I don't know how to say this nicely, but sometimes we feel uncomfortable giving an honest appraisal of where our organization is. Whether it's the political climate at your organization, the culture, it could be a million things, but um, it either is you skew really, really negative. Oh my God, the sky is falling, everything's awful in our organization. We've got all this way to go to achieve our strategy, and that's not honest appraisal. Or everything's perfect, we're great. This is we do all this stuff really well. And that usually um is a result of, I call it, my dad used to call it navel gazing. You're looking at your own navel and you don't see what's going on in the world. So you don't have a really well-rounded, what are our competitors doing? How's the environment changing, et cetera. So probably that first step, believe it or not, is the most difficult step in the whole strategic planning process. Great question.
That was great. We've got a couple other ones and we have a little bit more time. So, Anne,
Yeah.
here's one. Why is implementing strategy so difficult?
The $1 million question. Um, there are a variety of reasons of why implementing strategy is difficult. Sometimes it's the complexity of the organization. When I lead the business acumen and strategy session for CPED, the open enrollment one, the first thing that we start out doing is we start out and each pod or each team has a puzzle in front of them. They have to put together the puzzle. And without giving away too much of the activity, the most common theme that comes out is strategy, setting a strategy, executing a strategy is like putting together a puzzle. If it's a real easy puzzle, like one design for ages 2 through 4, they got the big pieces and there's not a lot of them, and you can kind of see how everything fits together. You get a really good view of how it comes together. It makes it easier to solve that puzzle. But when you start to get into those bigger puzzles, 300 pieces, 500 pieces, 1,000 pieces, there's so many other pieces. And it's hard to figure out where to go and how to implement it. Now, there's some processes that you go through when you solve a puzzle. So I'll watch the teams and they'll sort out the flat edges and the corners and the like colors and things like that. And that's kind of like the strategic execution process. How are we going to get there? We're going to focus on these straight edges, or we're going to focus on these corners, or we're going to focus on these functions. And so having that process, kind of like putting together a puzzle, helps in that strategic execution. So complexity can really weigh into it. Engagement of individuals across the organization, not treating strategy as a top down type of a process, the execution of strategy. While, often strategy is set at those higher levels, it really should embody input and insight from all levels of the organization, and it should be communicated effectively to each level of the organization, so that you get not just the what or where are we going, but why. Why are we doing this to get that engagement?
That was great. Thanks, Ann. I think we have time for one more. This is kind of a big one, but maybe just a couple comments from you might be helpful.
Yeah.
It's why do strategies actually fail?
Hmm. Well, a lot of times strategies will fail because the organization will set their strategy. For example, we're going to be a differentiator. Okay. So how we're going to develop our competitive advantage, our sustainable competitive advantage, is we're going to be like the Ferrari. We're going to have some sort of differentiating factor from our competitors so that we can charge a higher price. But then when a push comes to shove, and as a recovering accountant, I'm breaking the accountant code. You get well, we're not going to spend money on that. We're not going to spend money on that. We're not going to spend money on that product development. So when you get into the day-to-day execution, and the rubber hits the road, or there's a financial downturn, and all of a sudden you can't spend money or invest money on the things that you're going to do to differentiate yourself, you run into a problem. Your strategy will fail. Or if you want to be you want to pursue that low cost strategy, if you don't know how to implement efficiency tools, how to get lean, how to eliminate waste at all levels of your organization, your strategy will fail. That's the 2-minute answer for
Yeah,
you.
and that was could have been a long one. So
It
thank
could
you,
be.
Ann.
That,
And
that's when
thank
you sign up for the business acumen and strategy session.
exactly. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. We so appreciate it.